Hi friends, welcome to Cracku's video series. Today I'll be discussing the DashCAT-9 analysis as a test taker. So I took the quant and LRDI section, Maruti took the verbal section. My scores weren't great, and from that basically what I thought about the test I'll try to explain over here. So let's start with the quant section. I felt this was slightly tougher than like CAT difficulty level. Not very difficult, just slightly more difficult. And I'll tell you why the difficulty essentially arose. You essentially tend to bank on a few easy questions to come from arithmetic, a few easy questions to come from algebra, from geometry. But here I felt that only the arithmetic questions were easy. Every other question was either like moderate or slightly hard. So because of that, there weren't a lot of easy questions to fall back on, which meant that in terms of time you would be kind of stressed for solving like 18 or 19 questions in this type of section. Even if you're a fast solver, this isn't a easy mock to completely solve. I'm a slow solver myself, so I know for sure that for me to get to 18 also it is a bit of a push. But over here I felt because all questions were slightly more time consuming, slightly more difficult, the number of questions that you could reasonably attempt was slightly on the lower side. So I think anywhere between 13 to 15 is a good attempt, anywhere above that is a very good attempt. So around 13 to 15 also I feel would be in the 95 percentile plus range. What I felt was that there were 4 easy questions which you could have definitely solved. There were 4 moderate questions in arithmetic, and there was one hard or difficult question. If you have seen my attempt, you know the question that I am referring to, and that question was essentially a big time sink. And one more question which was very difficult in arithmetic was the installments question, because I made a mess of it. Didn't completely understand it or solve it properly, but it's a time consuming question. So there were many arithmetic questions which were very time consuming, which basically meant that per question the time taken per question would be about 2 to 3 minutes, and whenever it's about 2 to 3 minutes your attempt rate goes down consequently. So over here I felt that in general, because of the harder questions from arithmetic, because there were no easy questions that easy questions in any of the other topics, this was a slightly tougher section. Having said that, you have to make sure that you do not miss these easy questions. In fact, I will tell you that the geometry in this section was one of the easiest geometries in any of the DashCAT scene. Like the geometry, 4 questions of geometry that were in this particular DashCAT were one of the easiest geometry questions of the entire DashCATs, I felt. All of them were very doable. All of them are very formula based. So if you're somebody whose concepts are very clear, this geometry should have been like a cakewalk for you, because it does not require a lot of lateral thinking, or it does not require some genius to strike. They were actually pretty simple formula applications. So if you struggled over here, you need to work on your geometry a bit, because it was many of them were straightforward. Many of them were like direct formula application, midpoint formula, melting, finding volume of the objects, and finding volume, equating volume, etc. So pretty simple formulaic kind of questions. You should have definitely gotten most of these geometry questions right. So again over here there were some easy questions for you to have, and if you don't manage to do that, maybe you have to check your question selection. You also have to check whether your geometry's concepts are clear or not, because all 4 of these questions ideally you should be able to solve. Now there were a couple of hard algebra questions, some difficult questions from number systems, one from probability, a couple of difficult moderate questions from modern maths, and a couple of difficult questions also from modern maths. So in general, if you're somebody who relies on this section, it would have been a bit difficult, but if your base is arithmetic and geometry, you still would have been okay. You would not have been badly off, even though the difficulty level was touch higher, because the difficulty level here was slightly more than what you normally see in CAT. So if you don't rely on this section, if you get bulk of your marks from arithmetic, geometry and algebra, you would be fine. But if you get much of your marks from the others, like one of number systems, one of modern maths, logarithms, etc., you would be in slight trouble, because the log questions weren't that easy. The like quadratic question was not easy. So because of all these slightly tougher questions, this was a slightly more difficult than usual quant section. Again, I think if you get 13 to 15 right, I think you are in a fairly comfortable zone. But things that you should focus on are that you don't miss any of the easy questions. You should get all the geometry questions in this particular type of section correct, because they are very conceptual, and if your concepts are clear, you should be able to solve them. Okay, now let us take a look at the LRDI. This LRDI I think must have come as a shock to many, because it was very, very different from the usual LRDI sections that you are used to, and we want you to be used to different types of LRDI sets. We want LRDI sections to be a surprise. There shouldn't be that you have set expectations or ideas of how an LRDI section will look like, because CAT also surprises when it comes to the LRDI section. There is no given set format for the LRDI section, so you should be ready to face anything that the CAT exam throws at you. So this was a difficult LRDI section, not because the sets are very difficult. I'll actually tell you which were actually doable sets, and even if you go back now to the section, you will see that you can actually solve those sets. It was difficult because it was non-standard, and whenever you're faced with something which you have not solved before, you generally fumble under the pressure. So because of that, just because this was a quant heavy LRDI section, and if you're not used to something like that, you would find it very difficult to solve these type of sets. So having said that, there were some good sets, LRDI sets that you can definitely target it. I started with arrangements, and I think that was the right choice because I'm very used to it. It's a traditional type of DILR set, and you build competency in those kind of sets. I've solved hundreds of arrangement sets, and one more set won't be difficult for me. So that's why I started with that, and that is also what you should think of whenever you are actually seeing something which is completely different. At least try to solve the set which looks familiar, and hexagonal seating arrangement is definitely more familiar than a quant crossword puzzle. So I started with that, and I think that was the right thing to do. If you are facing an LRDI section which looks completely foreign to you, does not look familiar at all, try and find that one set which is familiar to you, which you have solved before, a type that you have seen, and then start with that. It was a moderate difficulty level, slightly takes like you have to draw 4 configurations, invalidate 2, then finally you have 2 configurations, and then you can solve the 6 questions. But 2 configurations is definitely not like unsolvable or too difficult to solve. In fact, I feel that this was one of the sets to target. 6 questions for this is like a good payoff for the amount of effort that is required to solve this set. The clock set was an easy set. The clock set just required a bit of visualization. It was not a difficult set, especially if you understand the basic concept of clocks. If you know the basic concept of clocks, if you have done that, this was actually a very easy set to solve, and you would get 3 easy questions from it. I could not visualize the set, still I got 3 out of the 4 questions right. So this was definitely one of the sets you should have attempted. The seating in seminar set was not easy, but it was not difficult also. It just basically, there was an initial learning curve. It was an initial learning curve to basically represent the seat number, and the if you are able to represent a number as the row number and seat number, once you have gotten that like calculation logic down, then it becomes trivial easy. Then you have to basically just solve for all of them to find out the values. This was doable. So I would say that this should be your first priority. This should still be your second priority. If you have time, you could have also done some of these. This one, which was the quant crossword, I felt was a very difficult set. In fact, statistics show that very few, I think 1 person got it right. So it was a very, very difficult set, and I think if you started with that set, it would have been very difficult to solve. It's not very difficult to solve as in you won't understand the set or it's like impossible to solve. It's difficult because most of you would not have attempted a set like that before. Even though a quant addition kind of puzzle has come in CAT before, those sets are rare, and because those sets are rare, we don't spend a lot of time practicing for them. But it is important to face all kinds of sets, including sets like these. So it is a difficult set because of lack of practice. So I would suggest actually try to solve this on your own. Try to do this as much as possible, so that firstly you become flexible in what type of sets you can solve, and you also learn a new type of set. So if this comes again in CAT, you will not be like completely at loss of what to do over here. So I learned how to solve this type of set because I took a look at the answer, I took a look at the explanation, I saw, okay, this is how you should go about solving it. It was not easy, definitely, but I think the next time a set like this comes, I'd be far more self-assured. Not just like this, but if any kind of addition kind of puzzle comes, I don't think I'll be that out of my depth because I at least know how to approach it. So basically always learn any type of new type of puzzle or any new type of LRDI set that you see how to approach it. So now not only see the solution, but see how to approach it. See that, okay, you have to put case 1, case 2, case 3. Case 1 is that this is the addition, and then you have to say that looking at specific values, this number can take only the values 0 or 9. So that is basically what you have to see. Anytime you see the repetition of letters, that is the clue you should focus on, and from that you can figure out that okay, this letter can only take values or numbers 0 to 9. So from that you should try to solve the arithmetic puzzle. So a difficult set but a learning example. So make sure that you learn as much as possible from this LRDI section. You might not have scored great marks in it, but don't worry. Anything which is like a surprise or anything which is different from your usual comfort zone might not give you a lot of marks initially, but it will definitely expand your comfort zone. So think of it in this way: you have learned something, you have added to your skill set, and basically make sure that anything else or anything new that comes your way, you add to your skill set, you take it positively, and you learn how to approach questions of that type. So this was my analysis for Quant and LRDI. Maruti will be doing the analysis for verbal.
Hi friends, my name is Maruti and I'm the co-founder of Cracku. In this video, I'll be doing the analysis of the verbal section of DashCAT-9. So let us get started. The verbal section of DashCAT-9, like most of the mocks, has 24 questions. And out of those 24 questions, we have 16 questions in RC. That is, there are 4 reading comprehensions. Each of them has 4 questions, so there are a total of 16 questions, and there are 8 verbal ability questions. These 8 verbal ability questions come from 3 para summaries, 3 para jumbles, and 2 odd one out. Overall, the difficulty level of this entire section I would categorize as medium, because some of the RCs were definitely readable. If we are going through each of the RCs, the first RC was on philosophy. This I felt to be slightly on the harder side. So when I start a mock section, I first look at all the 4 RCs. I try to figure out what is the theme of the RC or what is the topic of the RC, and based on whether I'm interested in the topic or not, I choose my priority order of answering. So over here, the first RC that I actually chose to answer was polarization on Twitter. This I felt was something that was related to what is happening in the current affairs, and Twitter is something that everyone has an opinion about. So I thought this is something that I would easily go through. The second one that I answered was on the Earth's magnetic field. This was a science and technology passage, which again I'm interested in certain types of science and technology, especially with respect to either Earth or stars or astronomy. These are things that interest me. So I thought this will be something that I would be interested in. This was the second one I answered. After this, I went and I answered a few of the verbal ability questions. So first I get 2 RCs out of the way. After that, I attempt some verbal ability questions. Here I attempted the 3 para summaries after this, and maybe 1 or 2 para jumbles. I came back, I did the meaning of life as the third passage, and I went back, I completed the verbal ability, and at this point there were around 5 minutes left, 5 or 6 minutes, and then I came back and I answered the philosophy paragraph. My attempt is there on the Cracku website. If you just go to cracku.in, go to DashCAT-9, in the solutions page, you will be seeing my attempt of the verbal ability, so that you get a sense of how I manage time. If you are going through each of the RCs, the first RC was polarization on Twitter, the one that I attempted first, and I found this paragraph, this passage to be fairly easy to read. I was able to understand exactly what was happening, and I found the questions also to be fairly on the easy side. I think I got 3 out of 4 questions correct in this. This is definitely a passage that people should attempt, especially if they are active on any of the social media websites, and if they have some opinion on what is going on in social media, whether it is polarizing the society, whether it is bringing things that we don't know to the forefront. Those kind of things, anybody who is active in the social media, I think should definitely attempt this. The second one I attempted was the Earth's magnetic field. I found the paragraph to be very interesting. I felt I got to know some things which I didn't know earlier, but the questions were definitely on the tricky side. So the paragraph was easy to read, but the questions were difficult. Many of the questions involved slight or subtle additions or things that were not given in the paragraph. So there were some options where I felt the option is correct, but it was giving more information than what was giving in the paragraph. So in that sense, it was actually wrong. In that way, and there were many inference based questions. Which of the following would the author agree with? Which of the following sentence would the author disagree with? These kind of things are more to do with us getting in the shoes of the author. So here I felt the questions were definitely difficult. The passage was definitely easy to read, but the questions were definitely difficult. So overall, I would categorize this as medium. I think I got 2 out of 4 correct. Then I went to meaning of life. This was a slightly difficult passage to read. I didn't have a lot of concentration because by that time only I was already tired. And even though this was meaning of life, this was already bordering on philosophy. The first one was definitely hard, and even the third one they attempted, meaning of life, even this I felt the paragraph was not something that was an easy read. The middle two paragraphs, these two, the first two passages that I attempted were definitely on the easy side when respect to reading and comprehending the passage. But the last two that I attempted, both of them were philosophy based. I had a lot of difficulty in actually answering it, in actually reading it, let alone going to the questions, actually reading the paragraph and understanding what the author was saying. I had some difficulty. So I would categorize both of them as medium. In the fourth passage, that is the meaning of life one, this one, I think the questions were definitely easy. Even though I had difficulty in really understanding exactly what the author was saying, when I went to the questions, I could kind of figure out that, okay, these three options are wrong, so this option has to be correct. That way, I think in both the first as well as the fourth passage, in the questions, I was able to rule out one or two options immediately. I knew that this option was definitely wrong. So that helped my accuracy, even though I was not very comfortable with the passage. That is the reason I would say both of them, this was medium. And the first one was hard because I had absolutely no time to read it. And again, even when I was putting effort, I was not able to make a lot of sense out of it. So this I gave hard, this I think was medium. Now coming to the verbal ability section, the para summaries, three para summaries, all of them were definitely on the easy side. Again, similar to what happened in the philosophy passages, in this para summaries, immediately I could rule out one or two options. I knew that immediately one or two options was either adding more information than what was given in the para summary or not putting in a crucial element that was given in the paragraph. So immediately when I was looking at the para summaries, the way I actually attempt it is by ruling out options. That way I feel I'll get the correct option. Because trying to figure out what is the best way to summarize a paragraph is kind of subjective. You can't really say whether this is the best way to summarize a paragraph. But when you're looking at the options and you figure out that, okay, this is definitely not how we would summarize that paragraph. So I felt it was easy to rule out options in para summaries. And in all the three para summaries, I was able to immediately rule out one or two of them. So finally, I had to pick between two options, and my accuracy was also pretty good. So the para summaries I felt were definitely on the easy side. The para jumbles, on the other hand, were definitely on the difficult side. Because what happens in para jumbles is, because they are theta based questions, you have to get the exact order correct. So for example, if the answer for a para jumble is say 2, 3, 1, 4. The way I approach para jumbles is I look at some of the sentences and I feel that, okay, 3 has to come immediately before 1. So I know that 3 and 1 is one way of ordering 3 and 1. So this I was sure. But amongst 2, 4 and this bunch of 3, 1, I might not be super sure. So I might sometimes make a mistake of either making it as 3, 1, 2, 4 or 2, 3, 1. Instead of 2, 3, 1, 4, I make it as 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 4. So over here, if you think about it, I nearly came close to solving the para jumble. I knew most of the ordering, but I was making one crucial mistake because of which I was getting the para jumble wrong. That happened to me in 2 of the 3 para jumbles. So I knew that the para jumbles were tricky. And even after I looked at the solution, I could clearly see that, for example, I don't remember the answer, but say if the answer was 2, 3, 1, 4 and I put in as 3, 1, 2, 4. After looking at the solution also, I felt 2, 3, 1, 4 is definitely, that is the answer that is given is definitely a better way of phrasing the paragraph. But 3, 1, 2, 4 itself is not too bad. 3, 1, 2, 4 also in some level kind of makes sense. So you know that 2, 3, 1, 4 is the correct answer, but the answer that you put in is definitely not terribly wrong. So that was the impression that I got from the para jumbles. Based on that, I would say that this was definitely on the hard side. Odd one out, again, the way I attempt odd one out is when you're given 5 sentences and you have to remove one sentence, which is definitely not part of the para jumble. What I do is I don't try to solve the para jumble. What I try to do is, at least this is my strategy, I don't know whether that is good or bad. I try to find out pairs of sentences. So out of the 5 sentences, if I'm able to find out 2 pairs, which come one after the other. So if the 5 sentences that are given are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I figure out that, okay, 2 and 4 are one bunch, and 5 and 1 are one bunch. Both of them come together, both of them, either one sentence is adding to what the earlier sentence said, or one sentence will definitely come after the previous sentence. If I'm able to find out these 2 pairs, then I know that exactly the third sentence, the sentence that is left out, is the odd one out. That is the strategy I use for odd one out. Using that, I think both the questions could have been solved, although I got one question wrong, but I felt this strategy was kind of good enough and I got one question correct that way, and the other question also I think I could have gotten correct if I was slightly better prepared. So overall, I would say the verbal section was slightly on the medium side. The reading comprehensions were not very difficult to read, at least 2 of them. The other 2 were definitely tricky. The verbal ability, which is something that I'm not very strong at, I could immediately get all the 3 para summaries correct. So overall, there were questions that could be answered. Somebody who is not very strong at verbal also will be able to attempt this section and score some respectable marks. My assessment of what is a very good mark is 35 plus. 35 plus is a very good mark. Somebody who is aiming for 99 plus should be looking to score 35 plus in this section. Somebody who is aiming for a respectable score, something like say 85 percentile plus, should be looking for 25 plus in this section.